Footage for you, I think it was DV cam. I can't remember now. How many years ago was it? 5, 6 years ago.
Sorry to lose you.
No need to apologize. Been there, done that.
So can you tell us a bit about yourself, what you do, and where your interest in the Shroud comes?
All right, my name is Barrie Schwortz. I was the documenting photographer for the Shroud. Oh, I'm going to stop. You want me looking off camera?
To me.
Yeah, because I started looking, giving it. Okay, here we go. Okay. My name is Barrie Schwortz. I was the official documenting photographer for the Shroud of Turin research project. It's a team that performed the first ever in-depth scientific examination of the Shroud of Turin in 1978. So my interest in the Shroud comes from the opportunity I was given to spend 5 days and nights in the room with that piece of cloth. And I didn't sleep much. I spent most of the time in the room. If you're the documenting photographer, you don't want to miss anything. So I didn't sleep a lot. And so my interest in the Shroud really came from, obviously, the great opportunity I was given to study it up close and personal firsthand. But being Jewish, I was very hesitant to even join that team. I felt that it had no relevance to me, and I really wasn't interested in getting involved with something I felt was maybe a religious thing. Turns out our team was really purely a scientific team. Religion didn't enter into it, and I was one of several Jewish team members, and I think we represented every denomination all the way to agnostic and atheist on the team. So my interest really stemmed from that. 20 years later, after seeing the media not reporting very fairly and honestly about the Shroud, in 1995 I'd gotten on the internet and I realized I could do that too. And in 1996, Shroud.com went online, and we're now the oldest, largest resource of information on the internet on the Shroud of Turin.
And why is the Shroud such an important piece of humanity's history?
I think the Shroud is so important because obviously it represents a man who has had impact globally, not just for Christians, but also for Muslims. And I think that because of that, and because it depicts the tortures that he suffered, I believe that that serves as a sort of significant document that not only verifies what it says in the Gospels and Quran, but also humanizes him and shows us in very graphic detail the tortures that he suffered.
And in 1978, what were the conclusions of the research team?
Our team in 1978 went there primarily to answer a single question: how is the image formed? And so most of the testing that we performed was basically designed to help answer that question by gathering data, chemical, spectral, and photographic data that could ultimately be used after we returned to further our studies and ultimately determine what the image formation mechanism might have been. The conventional wisdom in those days was that it was either a painting or a photograph or a scorch. So our testing, our experiments were designed to gather the data that could answer those questions. We did answer those questions, but in the end sort of failed to answer the overriding question, what formed the image, because our data proved that it was not a painting, it proved it was not a photograph, and it proved it was not a scorch. But we don't know of a mechanism that can make an image with these chemical and physical properties that we've characterized on the Shroud. And so in a sense our team was very successful, but also failed because we could not answer the one big question we went to ask. And more than that, we came back with probably 1,000 new questions, which is why many of us hope that future testing will allow us to apply much more up-to-date and modern technology now, and perhaps answer some of those 1,000 questions we came back with, and maybe bring us closer to answering the primary question, how that image was formed.
And behind you there are 3 images. You've got the replica of the Shroud, and also the 2 black and white images. Can you talk to us about what those are and what they represent?
Sure. The primary image behind me is a life-size, natural color replica of the Shroud. That's exactly what it looked like when I made the photographs in 1978. The problem with that is the actual image on the Shroud is only 10 or 15% darker than the background, So it's very subtle, and there are so many markings on it, scorches and burns and patches and holes, that it has a tendency to confuse the uninitiated viewer and makes it very difficult to see what's really important, which is between those lines of burns and scorches. The advantage of the black and white high contrast images is that it reverses the lights and darks of the image, indicating that what's actually on the shroud is a negative, and the positive, we reverse the lights and dark, and that's what the black and white images are at either side of the replica. And of course there we've been able to improve the contrast and make the man stand out more prominently so that we can study and see the details of what's actually on the car.
And talk to us about the green image, the topographical image.
Right. What led to the forming of our team was the fact that a shroud photograph that had been taken in 1931 that was available to our team before we went, a couple of our guys went to a laboratory in near Los Alamos, the Sandia Laboratory. It's another national laboratory in the United States. And their gentleman had a device called a VP8 image analyzer. He was using it primarily to evaluate X-rays. And he got this device because it took the lights and darks of an X-ray and stretched them vertically into 3D space based on the lightness or darkness of the image density. They put a normal photograph in there and you get a jumble of shapes. It still does it, but you don't get anything natural. Put a shroud image in there and you get the natural relief of a human form. Now that was astounding because photography doesn't encode depth information. You know, in photography, depth is implied by shadow and highlight, but it's still two-dimensional. What's embedded in the shroud image is proportionate to the distance between the cloth and the body, so it's actual topographic information. And when they saw this and visualized it, and this had been theorized by others in the past, but this was the first time somebody visualized it with an instrument. When they did that, they realized there was something unique about the properties of this image. So they decided we should put a team together and maybe, get permission to go over there and figure out how the image was formed. And I had just finished a 7-month project for Los Alamos National Labs myself. And one of the guys I'd worked with was there when they put the shroud image into the VP8. So they called me up and said, "Hey, you want to get involved with this? What do you know about the Shroud of Turin?" And my first response was, "But I'm Jewish." And the guy laughed because he was also one of the Jewish guys on our team. And he said, "Look, this isn't a religious thing. This is about science and about studying this image and trying to determine how this image forms." And so I kind of grudgingly joined the team, thought about quitting, but eventually stayed on board, and ultimately led me to be a member of the team. 20 years later, I built Shroud.com because I felt the media was not reporting it fairly, and even though I didn't have an emotional attachment to the subject matter, millions of people, maybe billions of people on the planet do, and the media was not properly reporting it. So I felt that it was important to take the materials that I'd spent 20 years collecting and make them available to everybody on the internet, and that's the birth of Shroud.com.
And finally, once again, what are your thoughts on how the image was formed?
Well, remembering that our team went there to answer one question, how the image was formed, and this is a terrible thing to say in an interview, but the answer to that question, how the image was formed, I don't know. Our science was able to answer a lot of questions, but one of the things we could not do is determine any mechanism that could make an image with these same chemical and physical properties. And that's one thing our team was easily able to do, was characterize the image chemistry of the cloth. But we don't know of a mechanism that can make an image that encodes spatial and depth information with image density. And many other characteristics. If you look closely at the image of the shroud, you'll see it has no distinct edges the way any artwork would. The image just fades out. And so no artist does that. This is not an artwork. But as far as how the image was formed, the only honest answer I can give is, I don't know.
And once again,
Here, as we move down a little further, you can see a spear wound. You can clearly see the oval shape of the wound itself and the blood flow below it. We do have these diamond-shaped markings. These are water stains from the 1532 fire, and these are significantly on the cloth. Another one here and above, and you'll find them throughout the shroud, which only add to the confusion of what you see on the shroud's image. If we travel a little further down here, we can see blood stains on the wrists or on the arms, and here at the back of the wrist, we see the blood stain from the crucifixion wound of the hands. We cannot tell the precise point of entry of the crucifixion nail in the hand, but it was most likely right about here, just about an inch below the center of the palm. If we go a little further down, of course, we can see the legs all the way down to the feet, and again we can see blood stains from the crucifixion nails in the feet, but we cannot judge from the shroud itself whether one or two nails were used. I think most Christians prefer the idea of three nails, particularly Catholics, because it kind of goes with the Trinity, which is part of the Catholic faith. But the remains of actual crucifixion victims that have been found typically have one nail in each foot from the side, so it looks like they were nailed 1 foot at a time to the vertical stanchion or the stipes. Further down this way, again, we can take a look. We have now the back of the head, and here you can clearly see that the blood stains actually cover the scalp, not just in a circlet the way artists have depicted it, but in a much more accurate way, the way it probably happened. They took, Roman soldiers probably just took a couple of nasty thorn bushes and smashed them onto his head, and did not depict the man of the shroud the way artists do. This is much more forensically accurate. So we see the back of the head, we see there's a long bit of hair, kind of like my own hair. We see that his shoulders and back are covered with scourge wounds from a Roman flagrum. You can distinctively see the dumbbell shape of some of them here. And this is something I often want to point out, why I don't believe some medieval artists made this. We already saw the blood-stained wound from the spear wound in the side. What you can't see because of the burns is when he was laid in the cloth, that blood flowed around his side and pooled at the small of his back. That's called gravity, and no medieval artist would have even conceived of that. And so this to me is a strong indication that this is a natural blood flow and not some artist's depiction, because no medieval artist would have known what to do. We continue further down, we see that there's scourge wounds that go all the way down the body, all the way to his ankles. So he was literally beaten from head to toe. And again, we get to the feet, we see there's a complete footprint here, which by the way tells us that this knee was bent, because if you lay flat and you want to put your foot flat on the ground, the only way to do that is to bend your knee. So we know one knee is somewhat bent, and the other we see only the back of the ankle, so the toes would be pointing away from us. So what we have here is a forensically accurate depiction of the crucified.
Thank you. And if we could do the same, sorry.
You want to do it over here, yeah, and it'll be a lot more obvious over here.
Yeah.
And we can do it on both. You let me know when you look into the camera.
Oh yeah. So address the camera.
Go right to the camera. Okay. Tell me when you're rolling. I see it. It's already there. All right, we're going to take a look at the shroud again here, this time on the black and white negative view that I call negative view. This is where the lights and darks of the shroud have been reversed, and where we have improved the contrast or enhanced the contrast slightly to make it easier and add more contrast to make it more visible to the viewer. So again, if we start at the top, you see the blood stains at the top of the head. This marking here is below the chin is simply a crease. But some artists through the centuries who have looked at the shroud have incorporated that into their artwork as if it were part of the image, when in fact it's not. If you come down, you'll see there are scourge marks on the front of the body. Here's one of those large water stains. And of course you can see these patches which were sewn in during the repairs in 1534. Now you can much more clearly see the arms with the blood stains. Of course, they're light and dark reverse, so they're white in this view. We see the exit wound of the crucifixion nails at the back of the hands. We see the hands, we can even see the fingers. We go further down again, we have another one of these large water stains, and we go all the way down to the nails in the feet. Again, from the shroud, it's very difficult to know for certain whether it's 3 nails were used or 4 totally. And I think that pretty much covers the ventral view.
Thank you very much.
You want to do the dorsal view?
Yeah.
Hey, you got me. Once you get me started, it's easy. Get me stopped. Be on this side again. Oh, look at this, huh? I didn't even notice that. Okay, again, we start at the top. Now you can see that the blood stains literally start at the top of the scalp and cover the scalp, not just in the little circlet, which was typical of artistic depictions of Roman emperors and men of importance back in that first century. You can also see sort of the long pleat of hair, ponytail, sort of like the one I have at the back of my head. You can clearly see the shoulders and the scourge wounds all over the shoulders. You can see that these scourge wounds go all the way down to the feet. Here you clearly see that blood flow that came from the spear wound that pooled around to the small of the back, indicating a knowledge of gravity. If an artist did this, he would have to have invented gravity in medieval times, which I think is rather ludicrous. And here we go down and we see, look, scourge wounds all the way down to his ankles. So they literally beat him from head to toe. And it's a little difficult to see here, but we have the foot and the back of the ankle as I showed you on the life-size replica.